Yeah. All right, good afternoon, everyone. You don't have to film, you don't have to start filming just yet. Just a quick housekeeping rules. Once again, I am Benny Gilliam-Williams, University Events Coordinator here at Harris-Stowe State University. Couple housekeeping rules, once again, due to the capacity of this event, once you leave, that's kind of it. You won't be allowed to come back in, and we want to make sure that we keep this aisle clear, if possible. Right here must be remain clear, so behind the great doors back is fine for standing. And we want to respect the room and everyone speaking today, and also to remember, in Harris-Stowe State University, welcome events like this. As you know, we are bipartisan to all conversations, and we are the intellectual think tank in this region. But you may begin filming now. So at this time, please welcome Dr. Candace Eidelberg and Terry Daly Davis with the College of Arts and Sciences.
Hello, we are here to welcome you on behalf of Harris-Stowe State University's Institute for Social Justice. My name is Dr. Candace Eidelberg. I am the Assistant Professor of Sociology and also the Director for the Social Justice Institute.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Daly Davis. I'm the Assistant Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences, and I'm also the Co-Director for the Social Justice Institute.
So just a little bit about the Social Justice Institute. We are an institute that is guided by a theoretical application of pedagogy through courses, workshops, speakers, internships, and service-oriented opportunities. The Institute aims to address roots of injustice and create an avenue for understanding and developing innovative solutions. We are a platform, again, for bipartisan conversations to openly flow. We ask everyone to respect Harris-Stowe this evening, as we are an intellectual think tank. I leave you with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. "The hope of a secure and livable world lies with disciplined nonconformists who are dedicated to justice, peace, and brotherhood." We welcome you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, that's much better. I grew up in the church. Good afternoon. My name is Serena Wilson Griffin, and I am the first Assistant Circuit Attorney. I have the privilege of working with the Honorable Circuit Attorney, Kimberly Gardner. Ms. Gardner is actually scheduled to be here and will be here shortly. Her flight was delayed, but she is landing as I speak, so she will be here, but she wanted us to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much in advance for spending the afternoon with us. I assure you it will be worth it. Before you is a panel of amazing, brave, intelligent, strong Black women. Yeah. That's right. It's okay to clap. It is okay to clap. That's right. Show them some love. It's okay to clap. They represent a sisterhood that was born out of racist hazing that's encouraged and celebrated by a racist establishment. An establishment that has declared war on strong Black women that refuse to kiss the ring or dance when there's no music. Aramis Ayala, Diana Becton, Aisha Braveboy, the Honorable Kimberly Gardner will be here shortly, Stephanie Morales, Marilyn Mosby, Rachael Rollins. The women to my left are the manifestation of my ancestors' wildest dreams. They are also the status quo's worst nightmare. In a world full of people clamoring for a seat at the table, These women acquired the building in which that table sat. They then took the table and threw it out, and with their bare hands created a new table. But they didn't stop there. This is where the magic happens. They didn't stop there. After they created that table, they created a seat and like myself to join them at that table. They gave us a voice in that building that they acquired. They gave us a tangible role in the progress that they're fighting to make happen. These women are change agents. These women are pioneers. These women are fighting a fight on behalf of everyone in this room and must have to be respected and protected. These women are ushering in a change that is overdue, but also not negotiable. See, sometimes as lawyers, we tend to think we can negotiate everything. This change is not negotiable. It's happening. And that's something that hopefully we're all on the same page about. This change is not negotiable. So any attempt to stop it is futile. In advance, we want to thank everyone that has done anything to support this change. But also to those attempting to block this change, actively or by using passive-aggressive methods, because we know that happens, your efforts will not work. I'll say it again, your efforts will not work. We will not be intimidated, but we also will not be stopped. We will never accept a system that accepts finality over justice. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Like I said, I grew up in the church. We do that call and response. I like it. Y'all feeling it? You feeling the energy? Okay. I will turn it over to my colleague, Jami, from Vera Institute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Y'all are having church up in here. My name is Jami Hodge. I'm the director of the Reshaping Prosecution Program at the Vera Institute of Justice. And for those of you who are here and in the community, you will probably know already that we've been here working with Kim in her office for a little more than 2 years now, providing technical assistance and data analysis to help her implement her reform platform. It is my distinct honor to be here with you all today and with this amazing panel of our leaders. And so I just want to take a few minutes, and I also first want to just thank Harris-Stowe State University for hosting us. It is wonderful to be in this historic place at this historic time with this historic panel. And so I want to just take a few minutes to set a little context. Then I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists. I'm going to ask some questions of them and moderate the panel. And then we want to make sure to leave time for question and answer from the audience. I have some team members here with me who I believe have been handing out note cards. Before our last question, I will ask you to pass any note cards to the ends, and they'll collect them and they'll pass the questions up to us. So I'll let you know when it's time to do that. If there are folks who didn't get note cards and need note cards, if you can just raise your hands, we have some staff that can help. So I see a couple over there, if we can try and get note cards too. Okay, so with that, with the housekeeping, I'm just gonna, again, provide a little bit of background. So, as many of you know, since 2015, we've seen a new movement within the movement to address our broken criminal legal system. And since 2015, what we've seen is this movement shift to the power of the prosecutor. And at that time, what we saw are women, men, others running on platforms of change, re-envisioning the role of what a prosecutor could be. And their platforms included decarceration, understanding that as a country we incarcerate more than any place on the planet, and that incarceration has not made us any safer. They have run on platforms of addressing racial disparities, recognizing that in this country, Black babies born today, our Black baby boys have a 1 in 3 chance of being incarcerated compared to 1 in 17 for white baby boys. And they have run on platforms of transparency and accountability, recognizing that they serve on behalf of and at the pleasure of the people. And so making sure that they run offices and have platforms where they are sharing information and where what is done by a prosecutor isn't just remaining behind a black box. And what we know is that this is an office, the lead prosecutor's office is one of the most powerful in any criminal legal system. And these roles have traditionally been held by white men, with a report showing that 95% of the more than 2,300 prosecutors' offices in this country were held, those positions were held by a white person, 95%, and nearly 80% of them held by men. So what we now have is beginning to make a dent in this movement to have true representation, what the country looks like at the leadership level. And as I give the brief introduction, you'll hear that almost all of these women are the first in some respect in their roles. And for a little more context, of the more than 2,300 prosecutors' offices that exist in this country, there are 15 that are run by a Black woman. And I'd say 13 of them have been elected since 2015 on a reform platform. So of that 13, when Ms. Gardner gets here, we'll have 7 of the women here before you. This is amazing. It is amazing. All right, with that, I'm gonna give some brief introductions. So I'm gonna start at the far end of the table with State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy, who is the State's Attorney for Prince George's County, Maryland, and who was sworn in and began her role in 2019. Next to her is District Attorney Dinah Becton, who serves as the DA in Contra Costa County, California. And DA Becton is the first woman and first person of color to serve in that role in her office. Next to her is State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, who took her office and started her position in 2015, sort of being one of the early leaders in this movement. And Marilyn is in the Baltimore office, so she's the State's Attorney in Baltimore, Maryland. Next to Marilyn is Stephanie Morales, and Stephanie is the Commonwealth Attorney of Portsmouth, Virginia, where she, like Marilyn, took office in 2015, being one of the first to run on these platforms and get elected on the platforms. And she's the first woman to hold this role in her office. Next to her is the State's Attorney, Aramis Ayala, who represents the 9th Judicial Circuit of Florida, which is the area around Orlando. And Aramis took office in 2017, is the first woman to hold this role in her office, and the first Black person to hold this role in her state. And next to her is District Attorney Rachael Rollins, who is the District Attorney of Suffolk County, Massachusetts, which is the area, includes Boston.
Yay, Boston.
Yes. And Rachael took office in 2019. She's the first woman to hold this role in her office and the first woman of color in her state. So again, sitting here with history. And so one of the reasons we thought that this forum was so important, why we asked these women to come to St. Louis, to be with all of you, to receive all of this love, I love the energy in the room, is that we really wanted the people of St. Louis to know that Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner is not alone. She, along with her sisters sitting at this table, are leaders in this national movement to change our criminal legal system through the power of the prosecutor. And just as she's not alone in this movement for change, she's also not alone in facing the attacks of the status quo. And so we want to just give you a chance to hear about, from these women in their offices, the amazing work that's happening across this country to change our system, but then also to understand that this is a movement that's going to require all of us because of the attacks they're facing. So my first question for the panel is really just asking each of them to talk about a reform that they've implemented in their term as the lead prosecutor and why it's important to the movement for change. And so I'll start at the far end with Aisha Braveboy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and I can tell you that when I started running for office, I used the hashtag, which was sort of a play off my last name. I hope y'all caught that. It's Braveboy, okay? So clearly when I grew up, I was teased mercilessly by my peers, but but now that I'm state's attorney, I use it as a badge of honor, and I say we're hashtag Brave Justice, and that's how we've approached this office. And so coming into the office, one of the areas that I had a huge background on is juvenile justice reform. And I ran really on telling people in my community that we have to give our young people a second chance and sometimes a third chance, okay? Because what I knew was that 21% of all school-based arrests in our state, in the state of Maryland, occurred in Prince George's County, which was the wealthiest majority black county in the country. So if we are incarcerating our own children in our own schools, if we are arresting them when they are going to a place of learning, and yet many of them, too many, end up in our criminal justice system, what does that say about us? And so what I decided was that I'm going to give my children, the same second chance that other children get every single day. Now, and so we've embarked on what we call youth justice reform, because I'm getting rid of the term juvenile, because when you talk about juveniles, it has a negative connotation. And so I say these are young people. So this is youth justice reform, which focuses really on diversion and providing an opportunity for them to get all of the services they need in order to make better choices in the future. We have homeless children. Even in the wealthiest majority black county, we've got homeless children. We have children with mental health issues who have seen violence in their homes and in their communities, and they are traumatized. And so when they go to school, oftentimes they're bringing all that trauma and all their experience with them. And so we have to be smart about how we deal with young people, because we don't want them to remain in our justice system, because, and all of my colleagues up here can tell you, one of the commonalities that we see in so many people in the adult system is that they first entered the system as a young person. And guess what? They did not get the services they need. They were not treated like the children that they are. And therefore, they just became adults with those same issues, getting involved in the same bad behavior. But you know what happens? It escalates. And so youth justice reform is important. So when you hear your prosecutor talk about giving young people a second, sometimes a third chance, you got to support her. These children are our future, okay? Another area, because there's so many, and I know that we have a lot of commonalities, so I'll just mention one more, and I know that so many of my colleagues will talk about some of the other things that they're doing as well, is, and you'll hear the term conviction integrity, which is extremely important, because that means that we protect the convictions that we get, that we protect the justice system, the justice part of the system, not the conviction, but the justice part of the system. But an area that I'm also focusing on is sentencing integrity. Because so many black people, and I'll say it, yes, black people get over-sentenced for crimes that aren't sometimes even crimes if committed by other people. But when we look at our system, and it's hard to come forward and say that a judge over-sentenced someone, but guess what? It happens every single day. And so we have a sentencing integrity component within our office. And our first case that we looked at was a young man who was 16 years old when he committed a murder. He did it. He's not innocent of it. But he had spent nearly 29 years in jail. He was sentenced as a juvenile to life. We reviewed all of his records since he has been in prison. You know, people are very different when they are 15, 16, and 17 than they are when they're 40, 45, 50. And if we were only to look at what he did and not who he became, he would still be in jail. But I can tell you on December 18th, he was released because I stood up and I said, we want to give this young man a second chance. We put him into what's called reentry court. He received services that he needed. And guess what? I spoke with him this morning. He went on an interview with one of our local unions, and they're looking forward to signing him up and putting him to work. This is someone who's going to be a contributing member of our society. And that is what I'm doing, and so many of these women are doing up here. But you know what? You don't hear this from other prosecutors. You won't hear this anywhere else because they don't have the courage of their convictions. And the other part of it is that they don't understand is we have faith. So you can throw whatever you want at us, okay? But there's somebody else that we answer to, that we fear more than any man in this street, in this room. I'm just so proud to be able to have these young women beside me, because they are who give me that strength. I'm kind of one of the new kids on the block up here. But I can tell you, I had examples to look at. And so when I wanted to step out and do things, I looked at it and I said, well, if they could do it, I can too. And I appreciate being able to be here, and I can't wait to see my good friend Kim Gardner when she gets here.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dinah Becton, and I'm from Contra Costa County in California. I want to absolutely give a shout out to the National Bar Association, the oldest association of African American lawyers, because I see sitting in the front row my sister Mavis Thompson, past president. And I understand that my sister, the Honorable Anne Marie Clark, past president of the NBA Judicial Council, is here in the house as well. Shout out to them. But I want to focus our attention at this moment to the removal of old convictions. The old convictions that are on the record of so many people, especially black and brown people, can have a very significant effect on an individual's life. Those convictions can affect a person's ability to get gainful employment, to licensings to certain jobs like a barber and real estate and others that might provide livelihood. It prevents people from getting student loans for education and for housing. And so it's really important that for us as prosecutors that we continue to find innovative ways so that we can reform and strengthen the criminal justice system and really find a way to right things that were done in the past that have a disparate impact on so many in our communities. And so that's why I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to announce this past week our partnership with Code for America. that gave us the opportunity to proactively deliver tangible results for my community. And that was that we were able to deliver to the court for dismissal over 3,200 old criminal convictions related to marijuana. These old convictions go back to 1970, and they have the impact of having left a lasting imprint on a person's life. But by removing those convictions, we reduce a lot of barriers that were, as I said, an impediment to getting housing. But we also addressed something else that happened, and that was the failed war on drugs. And it was felt most strongly in communities of color. The dismissals of old convictions that we delivered to the court this week represented, in totality, 53% of those convictions were against people of color. 35% were against Black people, even though we only make up less than 8% of the population in my county. And so this gave us an opportunity to stand to affirmatively review and dismiss those convictions, but also to serve as a model and a blueprint for other offices around the country, as to how we can take and use technology to make government work for you, the people. So very proud of that, and in addition, of course, we've established our conviction integrity unit, as well as our unit that looks back at old sentences to correct those injustices. And I will yield the mic to my sister. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We can do better than that. Good afternoon. That's what I'm talking about. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to Harris-Stowe University. I went to Tuskegee University, so HBCU, you know. And of course, Vera Institute for putting this on, and Kim Gardner, my dear friend, who's not just a colleague, but a friend. I would not have missed the opportunity to be here and stand in support of her, especially as she comes under unprecedented attacks. So, and then last but certainly not least, I have to acknowledge you. St. Louis, y'all came out. Y'all represented today. But I need you all to understand how important it is. She's going to need your support, right? So I'm the state's attorney in Baltimore City. I came into office in 2015. I've been in office for 5 years. Sometimes I feel like it's 55 and a half years. But as was already stated, I need you guys to understand the importance of this time right now, right? When you think about the role of a prosecutor, prosecutors are one of the most important stakeholders in the criminal justice system. We are the ones who decide who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations they're going to make. We determine if an individual is going to get into the criminal justice system in the first place. It's an awesome amount of power and discretion, especially when you look at the disproportionate impact that the criminal justice system has had on communities of color. So Jami gave you a statistic, but I think I need to reiterate the statistic for you to put this in proper context. 95% of the individuals making a decision about who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations they're going to make, are white. 79% are white men. And as women of color, 15 out of the 2,300 that exist in this country, we represent 1% of all elected prosecutors in the country. So when you talk about the status quo, and we talked about this today at the press conference, we have keepers of the status quo that don't want to give that power up. Keepers of the status quo, and I talked about this, but that brought you mass incarceration and the over-criminalization of poor Black and brown people. So understanding that, one of the things that has put this in context for me, that has allowed me to rest upon my faith and know that at the end of the day, this is bigger than the 15 of us. It's not even about Kim Gardner. It's about what Kim Gardner represents for us, right? And so she's going to need your support. And let me tell you, it was the prayers and the individuals, even in this room, that were praying for me when 4 months into my term, a 25-year-old black man by the name of Freddie Carlos Gray Jr. made eye contact with police in his high-crime neighborhood and was unconstitutionally arrested, placed in a metal wagon, head first, feet shackled and handcuffed, and his pleas for medical attention were subsequently ignored, and he ultimately led to his death. I charged the individuals that were responsible, and I wouldn't do anything differently. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. Because at the time, besides my colleague Stephanie Morales, who actually got convictions on police officers, right? Nobody else in this country was prosecuting police. That accountability, where you have one standard of justice for all, regardless of one's race, sex, religion, and even occupation, that accountability led to exposure. A week after I charged those officers, the Department of Justice came in, exposed the discriminatory policing practices of the 8th largest police department in the country, and because of that exposure, we now have reform, a federal consent decree that even despite the federal administration that tried to stop it is still on record, and because of that reform, we have a spotlight on entrenched police corruption of one of the largest police departments in the country. And although those individual officers weren't held individually and criminally responsible, every single one of the police officers in Baltimore Police are being held accountable for the actions of a few. That's better than I could have ever hoped for. So understanding when it comes to police accountability is bigger. It was always bigger than me. So yes, we're up here, it's about reform. We understand we have to change a system that has been designed to disproportionately impact us. But we cannot be afraid to do the right thing. And the job of a prosecutor is always justice over convictions. That's the reason why I created the first conviction integrity unit in the entire state of Maryland, right? My colleague, Aisha, she's in her first year, she created one. She's doing it, right? I had 9 exonerations under my administration. Because what I've instilled upon my prosecutors is that our job is not just to go after those that we feel have committed a crime, but our duty in the pursuit of justice is to exonerate those that have been wrongly accused, convicted, and incarcerated. That is the reason that we fight each and every day. When it came down to the marijuana policy that I unveiled last year, we got pushback for. We looked at a law that has been discriminatorily applied against poor black and brown people. We knew nationally that if you're an African-American male, you're 4 times more likely to be arrested for mere possession of marijuana. But in the city of Baltimore, you were 6 times more likely. And even after we decriminalized 10 grams or less of marijuana, the police would issue citations. Guess what was happening? In 2015, after the decriminalization of 10 grams or less, they were issuing 89% of those citations to black people. In 2016, 94% to black people. 2017, 95% were issued to black people. And here is the most staggering statistic. One in which when you're faced with this type of data, what do? You use your discretion to not be complicit. 42% of all of the citations, we have 9 police districts in the city of Baltimore. 42% went to 1 out of 9 police districts. And guess what that was, where the uprising was? The Western District, which happens to be disproportionately impoverished and 95% black. And the pushback that I received when I said, as a prosecutor, guess what? I'm never gonna be complicit in the discriminatory enforcement of laws against poor black and brown people. And it doesn't matter how much marijuana you have or your criminal past, as long as there's individuals making billions of dollars, we're not criminalizing it here. This is the power of our discretion, and this is what is being attacked. We need you now more than ever.
Well, good afternoon. I am Stephanie Morales from Portsmouth, Virginia, and there is nothing that I can say to you to express just how beautiful you are, the spirit that you have, the love that you have for my girl Kim Gardner, the love that you're showing to us. We don't get this all the time. And, you know, I just want to say that whenever we have the opportunity to get people who get us, that's a beautiful experience for us. So just thank you for showing us love. Thank you for holding Kim down, because despite whatever anybody wants to do, the people are the ones who are in power. And I think that's what sets us apart from everybody else, is that we are comfortable and we are happy to cede power to communities. And we see the importance of respecting people. We see the value in not trying to be kings and queens, but servant leaders and true public servants. And so before I'm a prosecutor, I'm a mother of 4. I'm a wife, I'm a woman, I'm a graduate of Norfolk State University and HBCU. And I believe in trying to restore our communities and trying to undo the damage that people who have sat in my seat have done for longer than I have been alive. And so I can't even get started on all the different initiatives that I have to really try to see change in my community, but I have valued youth. And instead of criminalizing and surveilling them and over-policing them, I have brought them into my fold, had over 200 young people who I call junior Commonwealth attorneys, who are going to be the future leaders of our criminal legal system, which hopefully will become a criminal justice system, and will not be just a system of accountability for Black and brown people, but will be a system of accountability for law enforcement and prosecutors and the people who have power to change people's lives for the better. But the program that I really want to talk to you about is the Control-Alt-Delete program that I started within a month of taking office. That program is one where I and the members of my office go into the prisons, and we go into the communities, and we meet people where they are. We spend so much time talking about actual innocence. We spend a lot of time talking about exoneration, but I want to reach the people who've just made mistakes, the people who've had difficult circumstances in life that have led them to have issues with addiction, with violence, struggles with mental illness that have ended them up in a position where they are incarcerated. For, you know, whether they deserve to be incarcerated, let's not even get into that, or not. The reality is that they are people. All of us deserve an opportunity to live and live well. And so that program is aimed around, as a prosecutor, standing in the gap and standing in support of people who have been impacted by incarceration and helping them have the resources that they need, not just resume writing, but housing, food, the opportunity to understand how to operate and run businesses, and really just making community members understand that the people who have been incarcerated are folks that we owe a responsibility to as well. I am not just elected to serve people who are considered victims, but I'm elected to serve everybody in the community, including those who have been incarcerated. And so consistently for the past 5 years, we have been going in the community and in prisons trying to change people's lives. And as my colleague here stated, police accountability is a major issue for me. 3 months into my first term, which is around the same time as Marilyn was experiencing what she was going through, a young man in my city named William Chapman II, who was 18 years old, was killed in a Walmart parking lot by an officer named Stephen Rankin, who I took to trial myself. And over the course of a year and several pretrial motions, ended up with a guilty verdict for voluntary manslaughter and him going to prison. And the reality is that prosecutors for years and years are okay with locking everybody up. We're prosecuting any and everybody, holding everybody accountable. But when it comes down to that young man who was 18 years old, who meant something to me, who meant something to my community, and we don't ever know what he would have become, I have a responsibility to stand in that gap for him and all of the little boys like him, including my 2, to say, not on my watch, not in my name. And so I just want to be the constant reminder to all of you that you truly have women and prosecutors who are committed to seeing you as people, no matter what your struggles are, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done. You are people, we care about you, and there is power in your voices, and I want you, and I think this group knows that, but please be the example for everybody who's watching right now, just how powerful it is when you all decide to come together and stand up for what's right.
Good afternoon. So I come here bringing greetings from Florida, and I want to kind of piggyback a little bit off something Marilyn said when she talked about the responsibility that we as prosecutors have, and I stand by the mantra, to whom much is given, much is required. So we are responsible not to just stand idly on what we know. So I ran on a platform of information, of evidence-based policies, of looking at what needed to be implemented because what we had been doing for so long wasn't working. And as soon as I took office, I was faced with a possible death penalty. And the reason that that is important is because I come from Florida, where we lead in death penalty exonerations, where we understand that the disparate issues related to the death penalty, where we know that there is absolutely no closure, it is not a deterrent, and in Florida we spend $51 million a year to impose and implement the death penalty. When you're looking at that kind of data, we can't turn a blind eye and pretend that we are pursuing justice when we are pursuing revenge. So it's extremely important to me to be here today with all of my sisters to remind everyone we have to speak truth, and the truth is we are not a threat to public safety. What we are doing is speaking what needs to be said because it has gone silent for too many years. We have communities that often have a revolving door in the criminal justice system where one day they're a victim, the next day they're a defendant. So when we learn how to treat people, then we will have better outcomes. So when I looked at the data, I made a determination that in my discretion that we should not be pursuing death penalty, not in my name or not on my watch. And while the governor disagreed and ultimately the Florida Supreme Court disagreed, I still stand strong because you can criticize what I said, you can criticize my personality, you can talk about who I am and misrepresent me. But when all of that is done and you erase my face, the facts of death penalty remain, and that's what we need to talk about. So, as we sit here and talk about our reforms, we need voices to be mindful and to speak louder that it is not us who is the problem. It is not us who is saying something different. It is us who is speaking the truth and bringing light to what has been a dark criminal justice process. When we talk about mass incarceration, you know the first way to start addressing it is to lower the ceiling and stop killing people. So that is where death penalty is a big issue in this country and certainly in the state of Florida. And while I did not prevail in court, I too have absolutely no regrets. Number two, the other thing I want to just mention very briefly is our bail system in this country is destroying lives. It is increasing recidivism. And people are losing their jobs, losing their health care, going into mental health crisis. Their families are being broken. And what we also know is that 95% of the people who are incarcerated are coming back into our communities. So we have to be mindful of their release when we're sentencing them today, when we are putting them on bond and we're considering release. So I implemented a bond policy. All of us together stand strong, and we have to continue on in the light of truth. We don't have time to play with the shenanigans and get caught up in the criticisms. We stand on the foundation of truth because truth is the pathway to change.
So I'm Rachael Rollins. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm going to make just a few quick statements and then tell you the two things that we've done. Earlier this morning I said the criminal legal system is a system that was not designed by us or for us, but certainly with our communities in mind. And then all of the women up here understand that faith in our system is completely dependent on individuals having faith that the system actually works. And when you think about who the biggest actors are in the system, it's the police, it's prosecutors, and it's usually judges are like the three categories. Most of those individuals, as you've heard from my colleagues, do not represent or reflect the people that they are duty-bound to serve or protect. And they don't live in our communities, they don't speak our languages, they don't understand our rich, storied, and vibrant cultures. So what I can say is, lastly, when you think about all of the people that are upset about what we're doing, most of them are not elected. So remember, police are not elected. The chief of police is appointed by the mayor, who is elected. So when you have a problem with your police department, vote for a new mayor. Judges, at least in Massachusetts, judges are not elected. It's whether you know the governor or not. And what is hilarious to me is judges and police have the loudest voices when it comes to what it is that we're doing, and we were elected by you. So remember, what they're really saying when judges and the fraternal police and local police and national police organizations, it's not about us. They're saying they don't care about you or your voice or what you are requiring. So remember, we're your voice. This is your vote. You have to be involved in what we're doing. And in certain communities, who the president is, who your mayor, your governor, your federal or your state elected officials are nowhere near as important as who your district attorney, circuit attorney, state's attorney, or Commonwealth attorney. You can't walk down a street and touch a house that doesn't have an unsolved homicide or someone you love that's been incarcerated or is currently incarcerated. So what I did in Boston was I listed, before I even walked in the door, these are 15 types of nonviolent, non-serious crimes that in the first instance, I'm not even bringing them into the courthouse. We are doing what's called null processing them, because with my limited financial resources, I want to focus on the 1,367 unsolved homicides we have in Boston. And if you want to fight me over the police knocking on a door about driving with a suspended license, often that same home has an unsolved murder in it. And we look terrible as law enforcement, and we're members of law enforcement now, if we don't even know that we are putting resources, or the police are, into these nonviolent, non-serious crimes. That's number one, so I have a list of 15. Big problem, I was sued before I went in there, we'll talk about all that later. And then we are the only state in the United States, Massachusetts, that sued ICE and said you can no longer come into the public places of courthouses and arrest people when they go to court.
Thank you so much. I can't help but think about, as the movie Just Mercy was recently released, and Brian Stevenson, the amazing Brian Stevenson, has been out pushing his movie. One of the things that he often says is that slavery didn't end, it evolved. And to know that we have lead prosecutors whose eyes are wide open to the system where they are exercising power at this time where we have media and movies focused on it, then we shouldn't be surprised why, and I'll borrow Marilyn's phrase from this morning, why the keepers of the status quo are so determined to fight to keep things the way they are and to fight against those who are working for change. So my next question, and because of time and because I want to make sure that we can get some audience question and answer, so at this time I will ask, if you haven't passed your cards, to please get them to staff. I'll ask a few of you just to respond to the question and elaborate a little bit on the attacks that you have faced. I know the folks here are very familiar with what Kim Gardner has been going through since she took office here. But again, she's not alone, and it is a concerted effort that's coming at the highest level of our government, as we have the U.S. Attorney General calling out reform-minded prosecutors. So we know this is a concerted effort. And so I'd love to hear from a few, and maybe I'll ask Rachael if you'll start with specifically the question, how are the attacks that you face as Black women lead prosecutors different than other reform-minded prosecutors? Because there are others, white, male, female, reform-minded prosecutors who've been elected who just don't face the same attacks they face.
So as Black women, we are dual minorities, right? And when white women are attacked, feminists jump up from, they sprout up from everywhere and support them. When Black men are attacked, the NAACP and the clergy overwhelmingly support them. That's what these organizations were set up to. And we are both of those things and often not as supported. What I'm proud to see is lots of clergy came forward today for our colleague Kim Gardner. But I will say, I think what is different for us is that we usually don't have tons of people sprinting to our defense when we are targeted and when we are violated, and that's a word I'm choosing. I want to remind you, power is never given, it's always taken. And so I think we've learned how powerful this position is, and why people are so scared is we have what's called autonomy. We don't have to ask permission to do the things that we're doing. We have prosecutorial discretion, which for centuries, and my DA's office started in 1806 in Boston. Since then, all of the men that had the job before me were able to use their prosecutorial discretion for mass incarceration, and no one ever blinked an eye. But now that I'm standing up and saying, no, we're doing something different, I've been challenged in court. Judges won't allow us to dismiss cases or what's called null pros. I had to file an emergency petition up to our Supreme Judicial Court, which we won immediately. The Attorney General has blatantly called us out. President Trump has specifically called me out for the ICE litigation. I know, judge me by my enemies, which I'm very proud of. Completely unheard of is there are 11 district attorneys in Massachusetts. One of them wrote an op-ed to the Boston Globe that was published, not a single fact or piece of data to support it. That wasn't even veiled racism. It was just straight up racism. So we are, and then I'm asked, is that racist? And I say back, you answer the question. I'm busy doing my job, right? We need not allies, because allies whisper, keep up the good work. What we need is unindicted co-conspirators that are sitting up here and screaming, this is racist and it's wrong and we need to change it.
Aramis or Stephanie?
So what I want to add to that, because I echo every sentiment that she has indicated, but they also question what we have to constantly prove is our competence. None of us just landed here. We are not filling quotas. There are multiple degrees and letters behind our names, years of practice, experience in the courtroom that people have to wonder, well, how did she get there? Read the credentials, So that's the type of attack. If you look at any article that has been written about any of us, it's going to question whether we understand the law, whether we know what we're doing, and it's always by the people who aren't even qualified to do what we do. I'm sitting literally with a legislature who, because they didn't like the exercise of my discretion, cut my budget $1.3 million attempting to cripple my office functionings. But guess who kept moving? Guess who kept moving forward and succeeding and never compromised public safety or reforms? See, those are the type of things that we have to endure. Now, so many of us are sitting here with young children as well, where we have received threats. We have strong men at home, partners, families, parents, who have to witness us being attacked and threatened, our lives threatened, letters sent, police reports that we have to file, nooses sent to my office, me ending up in federal litigation because a public official said that I should be lynched on Facebook. This is the type of stuff that we have to endure that is much different than any white female, any white any white male, any black male. It is something that is bigger. So the camaraderie, the sisterhood that you see is because there's no one who else has to endure this, and the level of strength and the level of tact is higher. So we have to go higher, and we have to keep fighting and setting the precedent.
That same question for maybe one more response, if there's anyone else who would like to weigh in.
You know, Marilyn.
I think when it comes to the types of attacks, specifically towards black women, it's vitriolic, right? I mean, the type of venom, it's very personal. So it's not just you calling into question my competency, it's you attacking me physically, I mean, you threatening me physically, you politically, ethically, socially, morally. I think any one of us can tell you, I had a book this big of hate mail and death threats. You racist nigger B. Yep. That's what they would call, and they've sent letters to my office, and they would call on a recurrent basis. There's been numerous times that we had police officer wives that actually called in and were threatening to kill me. We had to subsequently follow up. They've protested outside my house, published my children's picture online, including my address, and you still come up against the hurdles and the challenges that you have from the courts, right? Like when it comes to you actually doing your job, they've prevented me or attempted to prevent me from trying to right wrongful convictions. What did we have to do? We then had to figure out, because we do have the credentials, how we're gonna go and change the laws so that we can overturn unjust convictions of thousands of individuals. So I think the difference in all of it is like, at first, and this was pre-Trump, I also have the honor of being called a disgrace by President Trump. But when I first started getting the social media, there was a whole organization called Red Nation Rising, and it was just so nasty. And so what I had to learn very early on, I didn't have this camaraderie, I didn't have this sisterhood, but it was because of that experience that I said, I personally want to be there for any woman, especially a black woman, having to go through what I know they're going to go through, right? I don't ever want any of my sisters to have to go through what I went through, because I would get the people, and let me just tell you, I love my city, in Baltimore City, I will represent. I have love in Baltimore, but people would say, I got your back, I got your back, I got your back. And when they were calling for my resignation, calling me incompetent and suing me federally, so that it raised all the way to the level of Supreme Court, I'm looking back like, y'all must be way back, because I don't see nobody. So, even to this day, when we talk about what's happening to Kim, like we've all experienced it, and or we've lived through it and are still continuing to experience it. It was just last week the Fraternal Order of Police called me an overzealous prosecutor. And they said, not last week, but it was probably last year, as long as I'm in office, they're gonna keep their dues high. Well, if we apply one standard of justice, that's what you need to do. Because we're gonna apply to just one standard of justice regardless of your occupation here. But I tell you all of that, in the end, that's the difference. It's personal. And you have to learn not to internalize it. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's really not even about you personally. Again, it goes back to what I said before, it's about what you represent.
Wait, tell them where you're really from. Where were you born?
I'm from Boston.
That's right.
Boston, you said I'm Boston, I didn't say Boston.
Y'all so cute.
Yeah, right close to Four Corners, that's right, of course.
I know about Four Corners.
All right now. Y'all gonna rep y'all set, huh? I just want to add one quick thing. You know, this is where Maryland's strength, all of us are strong. We will fight all the way to the mat and beyond. But the problem is that we have young people watching this. And when these attacks are allowed to continue, when we are just expected to internalize it and just shoulder it or have a thick skin, that becomes a danger to the future generations who will come behind us. Because this is a deterrent. I've had young people in college who wanted to do what I'm doing to say, I don't want to deal with what you had to go through. When I made a rap video with my family and then got told, you're gonna get young girls raped because you had your stomach out in the video and you need to resign, and all of these hateful, misogynistic things that I had to experience, that had all these young people who said, you know what, I relate to you because I'm myself and I wanna do what I wanna do with my family, but I can't run for office because I can't deal with that level of attack. It becomes dangerous to our future. We have to worry about succession planning because we will not be doing this forever. And we should not be doing this forever. There should be other people who can come behind us. But beyond just people who want to be elected officials, we have young people who should understand their value and their worth and that they are not to be disrespected. So just understand that if you turn a blind eye or if you expect us to always fight our own battles, your son or your daughter could be watching us going through this and thinking that that's the behavior and the disrespect that they have to tolerate and have a thick skin for, and that is not the way it's supposed to be. It should not be tolerated.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I want to ask one more question, and then I'm going to get to some audience questions. I'm just going to call on a couple of you to respond, because after hearing so much about the attacks and the obstacles that you face, why do you persist? What is it that motivates you to continue to fight so hard for the communities that you represent? And I'll start with Dinah Becton.
So, thank you, Jami, and well, I was just really moved by all the love that we're getting in the room today, because I think that we all stand here together, first of all, supporting one another, because as you've heard over and over, very often we're standing up and we're talking and we're trying to do something different in a criminal justice system that really doesn't want to be changed. And so thank you all for being here and supporting not only Kim Gardner, but also supporting us as we stand to support each other. But we've started on a path that we can't turn back from. We are on a mission because our criminal justice system is out of whack. You heard the statistics. The statistics are, we are the most over-incarcerated country in the world. 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. And that means that people of color, black and brown people, get the brunt of these policies and these systems that have been in place for centuries. And so this is not about any of us as an individual. This is about us lifting our voice, using the discretion that the power of our office provides us to say, no, we are not going to try to criminalize people who suffer from mental illness, that we're going to find other ways than putting people in jail when people have drug addiction. We can use our discretionary power that we can say, no, this is not a criminal justice problem. This is a problem that needs to be solved by the healthcare system. And we're going to divert you, not here into jail, but over here to get some help. So we stand up, we have to stand up for our immigrant communities. We have to give our voice, because people are living in fear, afraid to come to court, afraid to report crimes. And we have policies that had been in place in our own offices that gave disparate treatment to people because of their status. It is an injustice when a person can commit, two people can commit the same crime. And one can go home on diversion and the other has to be separated from their family and deported out of the country. So we don't really have a choice to say, should we do this? We have to, if we're going to stand up in this position to say that we're fighting for justice for everyone, and we really mean that, then we have no choice. History has placed us in this place at this time, and we are answering the call. And as you've heard from the end of the table, power concedes nothing without a demand, and we are using our voices to stand up and say we are demanding justice and equality for everyone in our community.
You want me to? Okay. So well, I'll go back to what I said earlier, my faith in God. God directs all of our steps. We understand and we know that. Now, there is obviously a separation between quote-unquote church and state. We get that part. But in order to do our jobs, in order to do them effectively, we have to believe in something. And so faith is what directs me. But when I see all of you, that's really what motivates me to do the job that I do. Because it's your voice, it's your issues, it's how our system has affected you that has led to us being here. We are a reflection, really, of you. You have to understand that. We would not be here unless there were people like you who show up to vote. Because if we were going to be appointed, if this was an appointed position, none of us would be up here, okay? Let's be clear. If this was an appointed position, we would not be sitting here. So the reason that we are here and the reason why we choose to do the job in the way we're doing it is because you sent us here to do this job. And I cannot come to you not doing my job. I can't come to you with the same old system that you voted for me to change. I can't come to you when little black kids are still being locked up at alarming rates. You know, when I decided to end my office's request for cash bail in the state of Maryland, they thought, well, I mean, we don't know, like, what, I mean, what is she doing? But why am I criminalizing poverty? What's that about? I'm trying to figure out why somebody didn't do that before me. But here's the point. The point is, you tell us how you want your criminal justice system to look. That's why you voted for us. We told you what we wanted to do. You voted for us because you wanted to see the changes. Who are we not to make those changes? Who are we not to make those changes? So that's why I do the job that I do.
Quick, Aramis.
I just wanted to say real quick, I think we have to be mindful of how we phrase that question, why do we still do this? I think we can also flip it and say, why do they continue to do this when they know we're going to keep pushing back, right? We are nonstop. We've been inspired. It is in our blood. It is in our DNA. It's who we are. We have a list of historical figures who have lifted us up, on whose shoulders we stand. There is no stopping us now.
Okay, so I have a few audience questions, and so I'm gonna do this first question, which is asking specifically about the parole system in terms of how long people have to be on parole, people who have aged out and are still on parole, people who have had no infractions and are still on parole. So I want to broaden the question, because I know every jurisdiction is a little different. Not every jurisdiction has parole, but to talk about the 6 million people in this country who are under supervision, and to just get some thoughts about both that and the other aspect that we haven't touched on. We talked on conviction integrity units and exonerating folks, but in addition to being the country that incarcerates the most, we also incarcerate longer. than other places. And if one of you could talk a little bit about the needs, or if, you know, sort of even what the obstacles are to being able to address the length of sentences that we hand out regularly in this country. So let's start with supervision, if there's someone who wants to take on that question.
Yes, somebody sent me the baby.
One of the things I'm proud of with respect to parole, and we do have it in Massachusetts, we don't have the death penalty. We have natural life without the possibility of parole. We have had some very large, serious cases, obviously the Marathon bombing case, that was federal, and that was a federal death penalty, so it wasn't the state that did that. But one of the things I've done is let the criminal defense bar know that when I took office, I asked, can I have a letter sample of when we've supported parole and a letter of when we've opposed parole? And the person I spoke to or was speaking to looked at me like I was speaking in Russian, which neither one of us speak. And so he said, like, we don't ever support parole. And so I'm like, well, you must have once. My predecessor was there for 16 years. He said, I've been here for 30 years. We've never done it. So in my first year, we've written maybe upwards of 5 or 10 letters in support of people that we support their parole. Now remember, we have the important role, certainly in Massachusetts, we have a victim rights statute. We talk a lot about wrongly incarcerated people. We talk a lot about sentencing integrity. So even if they did commit the crime, was it fair? We have the obligation to speak to the family of the victims. And remember, many of the defendants and the victims are both from our community. So even though people are over-prosecuted, over-policed, you know, higher sentences, we are the same families that are losing our loved ones to gun violence and crimes. So it is a really hard job, but I think what I'm most proud of is that when you treat people with dignity and respect, you can have very hard conversations with them. To say, although I understand you oppose parole for this individual, they've served 27 years, or we have, you know, additional information. So I am being active. I am making sure that we get presentations about parole, and I'm supporting it in the circumstances where I find it is appropriate to do so. And in every letter, I always make sure I say what the family of the victim wants. Even though we're not obligated to, we say either they support it or they don't, because I want our parole board to make an informed decision.
So I had the awesome opportunity this past year, well, last year, to go to Germany and to Portugal. And what they have, and the irony of actually going to Germany, right, where we know the Holocaust took place, it was one of the most heinous atrocities of our time. The irony that I took away from going across seas and going to an open prison and seeing that even for the most stringent, the most heinous murderer, the highest maximum sentence is 25 years. In Portugal, 15. And so what it made me think about was walking away, the level of compassion, dignity, and respect that even in a place like Germany, with their past, we don't replicate here in the United States. When we think about the conditions of confinement for individuals, we treat mostly poor Black and brown people. We're housing every ailment for mental health, substance use disorder. They end up in these facilities, but we treat them like animals. And I literally was on an open prison that looked like a college campus with murderers that were walking around, and the corrections officers weren't corrections officers with tasers and what is it, the spray, right? Or guns. These were individuals, we were treating them like human. And the level of humanity that they exhibited is something that we just do not do. Yet we have an expectation that the individuals that are here and being housed are gonna come out and be able to act and exhibit traits of humanity when you haven't treated them that way. So, since my experience having gone across seas. You know, one of the things that we're actually talking about in researching, I brought a policy and strategic policy and planning director onto my office from the Drug Policy Alliance, is actually looking at and creating a sentencing review unit that will look at juvenile lifers. Because in the state of Maryland, we have life without the possibility of parole and life. But unfortunately, it's been a political game, and the governor has to approve if it goes beyond life without the possibility, if it goes beyond life, but in essence, they haven't granted that. So we are acting as a state of life without the possibility of parole. And so one of the things that we actually are taking up, and again, this comes back to what we originally talked about that awesome amount of discretion that prosecutors have, right, at every stage of the criminal justice system. Not just before a crime takes place and the creation of crime control and prevention initiatives, not just when a crime takes place and ensuring we're utilizing our discretion, not just after a crime takes place and changing the laws, right, but even as the individuals are coming out and re-entering society. If we think about it, it becomes a public safety concern, one that we have to take up. If we're not treating individuals in a way in which they can get reacclimated into society, if they have a felony conviction and can no longer apply for a job, no longer apply for housing, can't get financial aid, so they can't go back to school, and then what other recourse do they have but to go out doing what they were doing in the first place? That in and of itself presents a public safety concern. And so as prosecutors, as reform-oriented prosecutors, that's something that is in the works and that I intend to be implementing sometime this year.
One other great thing about Germany is in Germany, their corrections officers, 2 years of training. Intense training before they can become a corrections officer. And we ask questions, no matter what crime you commit in Germany, you never lose your right to vote. Never, never. Because, and the answer was, because you're still German. Correct. Right?
And they would allow them to leave and come back. They allowed them to go and have a livelihood and so that they had experience and could work. That's like, this is just different.
Yeah. So I think we have time for maybe one or two more quick questions. So I'm just gonna ask for 2 responses to this one and then we'll try to squeeze in one more. So this question actually came from a number of people, which just reflects the heart of this amazing audience. But they want some examples of how can they be more supportive of Kim, of what she's going through. What can they do to truly be a support for her?
So the power in your voice is not just for you to go on social media and get real excited in this room. That voice that you have, where you have the power to elect us, you also have the power to elect other people who have the power to appoint other people. And so when you allow your voice to be heard, don't limit that to this room or to your Facebook. Carry that into the halls of the legislature, take it with you into City Hall, take it with you into people's inboxes and create those paper trails. You know, when people are pulling people's emails and all this scrutiny that people are subjected to, make sure that, you know, other people are held accountable for what they do or don't do to check the behavior for people who are interfering with somebody who is fighting for your rights and for your well-being. And so I would say, don't ever forget that power. Don't forget to show up for jury duty so that when she's doing these things, that you're not sick for a whole month. Oh, my arm is about to be hurting for 3 whole weeks. I can't come to jury duty. I got a doctor's appointment every day for the next year. Show up and exercise your civic responsibility and not just at the ballot box. And so we need you involved in every area of government. We need you holding everybody accountable and not just the ones who are in your face in the community, the ones who are not present, the ones who are not saying anything and who are complicit in the harms that you are facing in your communities.
And remember, so when I want for the non-lawyers here to understand, most people just think of the jury for the trial. If you get selected for jury duty, it could be a civil trial where like it's a car accident, or it could be the most violent criminal case. You get called, you sit there for 2 days, you get the verdict, you're gone, you don't have to come back for 3 years. Or you could be on a grand jury. Exactly. right? Which is where it's 3 to 4 months long, and day in and day out, you hear multiple cases. We need diversity in your voice everywhere, because if as prosecutors we are putting, now maybe not us, but we're 15 of the 2,300, right? So when they are putting forth cases that you don't think they've met their burden, you don't think we've met our burden, you no-bill that is what it's called, as in, nah, right? We're not moving forward with that. Or you true bill it, as in, yes, we're gonna move forward and we're gonna return an indictment. So for me, I think rallies, social media, and anyone who's running for office, you can demand that there's a forum where they answer questions that you want them to answer. And if they don't show up when you ask for them to come as an elected, as a candidate, then, you know, I'm not saying that's your vote or you're going to go with someone else, but people who are running for office will do almost anything if you ask them to. Take advantage of it.
I would just add, I think that it becomes oftentimes very difficult to have to always be like speaking up for yourself. And so if there are ways in which you can change the negative narrative, right, about her, and that is, be a surrogate for her, right? There are so many surrogates that are gonna pour all this negativity into the mainstream media. They're gonna talk bad and poorly about her and the things that she's trying to implement on your behalf. Sometimes it means a lot. Woo!
You're going to get a chance. You're going to get a chance to hear from your circuit attorney in just a minute. I'm going to let Marilyn finish her response.
So you all were asking what are the ways in which you can support Kim, and the first thing that I was saying is that you have to change the narrative, and she can use you as surrogates. Really have her back. Don't be so far behind that she can't see you, right? That's first and foremost. Be a surrogate for her. Second, it's not just ensuring that you vote for her, but those that are trying to hurt her. You have the power in voting against her opposition. And that is even more powerful and impactful because it sends a message that when you come for someone that represents and stands for us, we're coming for you. And then, last but certainly not least, she's gonna need your help. And if that's in the form of the election, standing at the polls, passing out lit, ensuring, and I don't know if I'm getting in trouble, but donating, right? Like, believe the powers that be and the status quo are mounting up money in opposition for her. So ensuring that you're there to support her in this next election.
And remember, mayors appoint commissioners of the police, right?
And I just, as a 501c3, I do have to just make sure I will be called to task when I get home, that, you know, we really are here in support of Kim in her current role as your state attorney, and we have to be really careful about having a different conversation when it comes time for election. But I think the overall point is clear. The way that you got her here, the way that you send your voice is that you vote for all of your officials who represent your values. So But I do want to make sure we're here in support of her in her current role. And, you know, we'll definitely have the election conversation in another forum. All right, okay, so with that, we are just about at time, so I'm gonna bring Kim Gardner to give us some closing remarks.
Just want to say thank you for being here, but more importantly, I want to thank these beautiful sisters in the effort to reform. I mean, they're my support. They've paved the way for me. I stand on their shoulders. We support each other. People ask, how am I strong? It's because these women right here, you know, I can turn to them, and they came at the drop of a dime because they are even more busy than me. So I want to say personally thank you to each and every one of you, because you guys did not have to do this. It chokes me up because, you know, we're fighting. We're fighting for not just me, but for these women here who have led the reform efforts, who are fighting for equality and justice in the criminal justice system, fighting for young people who are dying in our respective communities, and people want to use them as examples of how we're not doing our jobs. But I ask you, you don't care about these kids dying on the streets. You don't care about these dead bodies in the streets, because guess what? You don't live in those communities in which we live, in those communities where we see the devastation, we see the destruction, we see the hurt, the pain. But we want to always play, you know, the status quo, one-size-fits-all system, and we know from time and time again, it has not worked. It has not worked in our communities. It has not worked in the city of St. Louis. And this is saying enough is enough. As a black, female, reform-minded prosecutor, we all here face unthinkable challenges, unthinkable attacks, and we're not victims, but we're saying we're taking it to you. No longer are we gonna sit here and have the powerful few get together and choose to take out the people's voice. This is not about Kim Gardner. This is about the people who elected us to do our job, and they stop us at all costs. They stop us at all costs. This is about the people who sit around in the back rooms making decisions for all of us, but they don't live with all of us. They don't care about all of us. It's important that you understand this is not about electing Kim Gardner, because I want to make sure that a person like Kim Gardner can exist after Kim Gardner. This is not about that. This is about making sure you guys elected me in this jurisdiction to reform the criminal justice system, and this is about us doing that. No longer can we sit back and wait another 40 years until somebody says, let's do this. We're not waiting anymore. We're taking it to the people. This suit is by the people, for the people, and we are not going to back down. You're going to hear what really goes on. I'm tired of hearing young people who say they feel like the system is rigged against them. Well, guess what? Guess what? Now we're going to see, because we're going to make the system fair for everyone. Equal justice under the laws of this country and in this state. And so I just want to say thank you, ladies. You guys are just powerful, inspiring. You guys, Rachael Rollins, Stephanie Morales, Aramis, Queen, Marilyn. I cannot believe I have Marilyn Mosby in the house. I'm so proud to have both of them. Becton, Aisha Braveboy. These are powerful queens that are standing up for what's right. But it's not about me, it's about all of us, and we stand together. We stand on the shoulders of the giants that paved the way for us. This is not just about criminal justice reform, this is the new civil rights movement, and if you sit on the sideline, you're gonna see what's gonna happen. So I thank you guys for coming. I love you, each and every one of you, but don't let this be just a opportunity just to sit here in this room and say this in front of us. We have a lot of work to do, and we need to start now, because guess what? They're working, they're gonna fight to hold on to the status quo. So when I hear people say they want change, you need to fight for change. Stop sitting in the sidelines and let's do it. I thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all so much. We have one more quick presentation. I'm going to have Alderwoman Tyus come forward, so for a very quick presentation, and then we will be done. Alderwoman Tyus.
Good afternoon. For once, I don't have to be the most vocal voice in the House. I am so honored to be here with these beautiful black women. I want to take them all to the Board of Aldermen with me. I wanted, since they are elected officials and we have talked about what we can do to support, Kim already knows, I am not a quiet person. No. If they come near me, I start talking about George Peach and how he stole and the things that they did and how they did not incarcerate him, so they go away from me. I talk about plantation politics and they leave, okay? But I did want to bring to these beautiful black queens a greeting from the city of St. Louis. And I want you to know, this didn't just start. These people already know it. I was elected in '91. They could not shut me up. They could not beat me. They picked up my ward and moved it. I went home for 10 years, and then I came back here and kicked the door in and said, I don't have to go away. And when you let things happen to people, it comes back. Kim is experiencing what I experienced, but I try to back her up. I wanted to read this resolution. It is 8. It's for all of you, including our queen. And it says, whereas across the United States of America, the policies of our current criminal justice system has operated in a manner that has been adversely, unfairly, and inequitably affected many who are enacted with the system and results in harsh, unequitable consequences. And it needs to be corrected. Whereas during the 3 years, the years of get tough crimes and the lock them up and throw away the key, some of the public held those elected officials to the office of prosecutor to a false standard that a prosecutor's primary duty was to convict those charged with a crime. That in recent years, there's a new wave of prosecutors that have been elected throughout the nation and who are committed to reforming the nation's criminal system. They have made a strong commitment to address the mass incarceration, bail reform, and alternative sentencing, and police accountability. Whereas these new wave of prosecutors have taken their oath of office to support the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of the state in which they were elected seriously, they have also read and interpreted and enacted their duties as described and prescribed in the ABA's Criminal Justice Standard for Prosecutors. That one of the main things that people forget about criminal standards for prosecutors is the primary duty of the prosecutor is to seek justice within the bounds of the law, not to incarcerate. Justice. And justice means that you are supposed to seek justice. And if you find out that somebody has been unjustly treated, as Kim has with the young man that she's trying to get out of jail, you're supposed to try to undo that, not leave that the way it is. And whereas the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis wishes to welcome and acknowledge the enormous, inspirational, and influential impact that these 7 women who have come from across the United States to visit with us, and that they will continue to shape the criminal justice reform, and we want them to know that they have support right here in the city, in City Hall. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of this Honorable Board of Aldermen join the sponsors of this resolution in extending the welcome to these 7 elected African-American prosecutors, and to thank them for their leadership, and to instruct the clerk and this Honorable Board of Aldermen to prepare a memorable copy inscribed on this resolution to be presented at this appropriate time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. That would be me, Sharon Tyus, Esquire, former public defender. Okay. All right. And I have one for each of the ladies. They're all the same. I am so honored. I've watched and followed many of you. I'm older than you all by a few years, but I'm still in there fighting. Because what makes you come back year after year is because my mama raised me. Stand up for yourself because you already a black woman, so you can't make me nothing than what I'm already. So what you gonna do? And all these black women right here, they already know they black women. All you gotta do is get up again and fight. I appreciate you, and the city of St. Louis appreciates you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alderwoman.